And I was at the 4 o'clock. So even though it wasn't like 15 years, 5 to 7 o'clock, that comes in. So that's
Welcome. Thanks for being here. I'm Marisa Elliott. I'm the Center's Chief Operating Officer. The Center has always been a resource for the LGBT community to come together to hear from people the issues of the day. And that's why we're here today, is to learn more about the Dallas County District Attorney's new LGBT Task Force. For those of you who are not able to physically make the meeting and are instead watching via streaming media or a late recording of the event, we welcome you too. And now, the Center would like to welcome Dallas County District Attorney Craig Watkins.
First of all, good afternoon. I want to thank you all for allowing unit and also a citizens prosecution unit that will give you a more in-depth synopsis of what we do. It's how many weeks long is it? 10 weeks long, and we have some representatives from the Alumni Association of that unit here. They're in the back. They're in the process of raising funds, and those funds will basically help the district attorney's office here in Dallas County. We have, and I tried to count everyone, but we have like 14 DAs here. Did I count that right? Can y'all stand up if you don't mind so they can see? Yeah. There you go. And I think, you know, this is just an example of the commitment that we have to make sure that we're going to provide whatever is necessary to make sure that this community is protected. We also have a you know, putting something like this together years ago. Unfortunately, we've been able to do that now. This really gives us an opportunity to address issues within this community to make sure that you're comfortable with the district attorney's office, to make sure that you understand that we are there to protect you just like we're there to protect all the citizens of Dallas County. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over, and I don't know who's next. James Tate works for the DA's office. He's a member of your community, and I would imagine that you were instrumental in putting this together to make sure we can come out and talk to y'all folks about some of the things we do. But I think that Elise is going to be next. Is that how it works? Okay. Elise Lindbergh works for the DA's office. She's going to be next, and she's going to give you a PowerPoint on some of the things that are how the DA's office operates. But I just want to thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for inviting us in. And our door is always open at the district attorney's office. And I just want to end with, we are here to protect you. Thanks.
Okay, so I just wanted to start off. Elise is going to give an amazing PowerPoint presentation. We thought that it was a good idea through some discovery that we did when we started forming the task force. We really wanted to see what people knew about the process of a case, and after someone has been victimized, where does it go from there? So Elise is going to give a really interesting PowerPoint about that, but I wanted to introduce myself first. My name is James Tate. I am Mr. Watkins' Community Relations Manager. So the genesis of this task force really started right here in this very building. Mr. Watkins had set up a meeting with CC Cox, the executive director here, or I believe she's the CEO now, of Resource Center, and really he came from a position of what is the immediate needs of the LGBT community? What is missing? How can we help you? And without pause, she said there is a fear factor. There are crimes that have been committed and continue being committed in Dallas County that are not being reported to your office simply out of fear. That I think that it's no purple elephant that there has been some tension between the LGBT community and members of law enforcement all across the board. So on the way back from this meeting, Mr. Watkins was adamant about getting a task force comprised to really foster and build a better relationship and communication between our office, what we do, how we prosecute cases, and really to form the message that we are loyal to victims. And so we have done that thus far, and here we are in front of you all today. This has been a meeting that's come into planning for quite some time, but we're happy with the turnout. First, I wanted to thank Resource Center for allowing us to use their space and hosting us in their office. Mr. Watkins had spoken very briefly about the Citizen Prosecutor Academy, which we have just finished our 4th academy. It is a 10-week academy where we invite citizens of Dallas County to come in and every week learn about a different division in our office. And the representatives there in the back that have provided the wonderful refreshments and cake for you today are alumni, and they have their own organization, kind of a nonprofit arm of our organization called DACA, the Dallas County District Attorney's Community Ambassadors. And so I wanted to thank them. We have some other elected officials, I believe. Mr. Kingston from the City Council, Dallas City Council is here. And we have both Shelley Knight and Laura Martin, which are kind of our allies in being LGBT liaisons in their respective organizations, the Dallas Police Department and the Dallas Sheriff's Office. So I wanted to thank them, and now I'll turn it over to Elise. She'll kind of give you just a very quick overview of what happens once a case enters our office. Oh, I guess I could introduce everyone else. Why don't you the whole task force come up here just really quick so everyone will know who you are. And I'll let you introduce yourselves, starting with Justin.
Hello, I'm Justin Lord. I'm an assistant DA under Mr. Watkins here in Dallas at the DA's office.
I am Tanya Silva. I'm a lieutenant administrative investigator with the Police Department.
I'm Renee Brazil. I am a victim advocate and therapist with the DA's office.
My name is Craig McNeil. I'm the prosecutor in the Public Integrity Division and for the Veterans Court.
I'm Elise Lindberg, and I am the chief over the grand jury intake section and a member of the task force.
Perfect. And so since we have this slide up, I really want Renee Brazil, who is an amazing resource to a lot of our victims in the office, to really just disclose who we are. This is kind of our coming out party, so to speak, to the LGBT community. And so it's important that you all know what it is that we are striving to do. So, Renee?
Well, so our mission of the Dallas County District Attorney's Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Task Force is to fortify a continued relationship with the LGBT community and Dallas County communities at large. What this is we want to open up a conversation about the issues that concern you and the victimization that's happening in the community, and we want to be part of the solution. As a victim advocate, I know Mr. Watkins has supported us in doing a number of kind of non-traditional things within our office. Next month, we will start a victim witness support group for folks that are actually testifying in their own victimization case. And we will provide them with support, resources, and whatever else they need to make it through that process. For those folks like myself who are not law enforcement, being in the DA's office has been an eye-opening experience, and learning about how long those processes are and how difficult it is for the victim to sustain through that process has been really kind of mind-boggling for me. So with Mr. Watkins' support, we have started doing some things to help those victims. I'm thrilled that we're going to be doing the support group, and we'll continue to be responsive to the victims. There's also, our presence is now in some of the most troubled schools in our Dallas Independent School District. We are now doing justice in schools so that we can start doing prevention efforts as well. And again, part of victim advocacy, because we all know that victimization is happening in our schools as well. So the ADAs are present there, and we are beginning to be a voice there also. So Mr. Watkins has a very broad vision, and this is one part of it. I'm thrilled and honored to be part of the task force, and hope that if I can ever serve or offer any resources to any of you, that you will certainly reach out. I would be glad to help in any way. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Elise, and she's going to teach you about all the interesting things that happens when the case comes up for prosecution.
Just to start off, how many people here know, raise your hand, know what happens between the time that our law enforcement officers, like these fine folks that are here, when they make an arrest until the time the case is gone to trial. Does anyone, raise your hands if you know what that process is like? Okay, a few people. Well, I'm going to give you a little bit of background and let you know basically how all cases go through the system. And one thing is that, you know, when you think about DA's offices or you think about police departments, you think of sending people to jail. And that's typically always been what you think of when you think of a prosecutor's office. But one of the great things that happened when Mr. Watkins came into office in 2007 is he basically took what is actually the true duty of a prosecutor, basically to see that justice is done, but not just to seek to convict. He basically put this up in all of the DA workrooms, in all of the courts that all of the prosecutors work at in the entire office. And the reason why he did that is he wanted us to remember that it's not just about prosecution, it's not just about sending someone to jail, it's not just about a conviction, but it's about doing the right thing. And I can't tell you enough how honored I am to be part of his team and to be here today, because that is the way Mr. Watkins leads the entire office. And Mr. Watkins actually didn't hire me. I was hired by his predecessor. And when he came into office, he wanted to make sure that everything was done right. And I can't tell you what an honor it is to be here after these years and to be part of his team and to see all the things he's done, to be so progressive and to be so cutting edge. He's on the cutting edge of doing everything he can to serve the community that he represents. And it's an honor to be here, and it's an honor to tell you guys about what we do at the DA's office. So who are we? The DA's office has a lot of different divisions in it. We have investigators, attorneys, support staff. Grand jury intake basically is where all the cases start to come in from law enforcement. When that paper case is made by for example, the Dallas Police Department, it comes into our grand jury intake section, and eventually will go down to either one of the 17 felony or 13 misdemeanor courts. Specialized crime is going to be our white-collar crime. Organized crime is going to be our big drug cases. We have a gang unit, family violence section, child abuse section, conviction integrity. So that's one of the other things that he did, is Mr. Watkins was so concerned not only with making sure we have the right person, but also going back and if someone was wrongfully convicted, that we actually get the right person and that person is convicted, which is what the conviction integrity unit focuses on. The juvenile division, we have JP for checks and ID theft task force as well, a civil division, and what do we do? I don't know if anyone really knows, but you know, the Dallas County DA's office doesn't just prosecute cases that happen in the city of Dallas, because there's lots of cities in Dallas. And so basically what happens is all those different cities, when any kind of crime happens from a class B misdemeanor or above, all of those cases come down to Dallas County. And so Mr. Watkins' office is going to be prosecuting all of those cases, whether it's a class B DWI or it's a capital murder case. So all those cases come in from all the different municipalities. But cities aren't only the ones that file cases with our office. We're going to have 26 cities in Dallas County, but we're going to have other agencies, such as Parkland Hospital Police Force, different agencies that file with us. And so basically the way it works is, in terms of a felony case, we have different levels of offenses. And Justin is going to talk to you a little bit about the hate crime statute a little bit later. But this is kind of helpful in that when he talks about that, he's going to talk about basically an offense that ends up being designated as a hate crime that we can prove. It basically bumps up the offense to the next higher degree. So if it starts off as a third degree, it goes to a second degree. If it's a state jail, it's going to go to a third degree. So this is the different levels and ranges of punishment for the different kinds of felony offenses. So a felony case. In our office, the police are the first line of looking at a case to determine whether or not there's sufficient evidence to prosecute the case. And then they send it to us. And for a felony case, every felony case has got to be indicted by a grand jury. We're not going to have a felony case in our office that's pending if it hasn't gone through a grand jury. And I think we even have some members of people in this room who were on grand juries before. And basically, that's going to be 12 citizens in the community that are going to hear these cases and decide whether or not an indictment should be handed down. And they decide to indict the case, and if they don't think there's sufficient evidence, they're going to no-bill the case. And so a prosecutor is going to review the case, it's going to go to the grand jury, and then if the grand jury decides to indict it, it's going to go to a trial prosecutor. And that prosecutor is going to look at the evidence again, prepare the case. They're going to offer a potential recommendation if the person wants to plead guilty. They're going to provide discovery to the defense counsel. And we have to provide that all to them. They don't have to give anything to us in terms of what their theory of the case is going to be, if there's any alibi witnesses. We don't know that until we get to trial. So the discovery only goes one way on that. And then there's going to be a disposition of the case. It's going to either have a plea, there's going to be a trial, or if we don't think there's sufficient evidence at that time, we're going to dismiss the case. And we always do, under Mr. Watkins' authority, we always do what's right. We're not here just to seek a conviction. Like I said, if the right thing to do is dismiss the case, he always supports that as well. So that's how a felony case basically moves through the system. And then misdemeanors are going to be cases, we have Class A's, which are up to a year in the jail, or Class B's. Now, Class C's are basically only a fine. We don't actually prosecute Class C's. The city attorney's office is going to do that. And then a misdemeanor case basically goes through the same process. It's going to go through the intake division after the police bring us the case. We're going to decide whether or not the evidence is sufficient to file it. The prosecutor is going to look at the evidence, provide discovery, and offer a recommendation. And then there's going to be some kind of disposition, whether it's a plea, a trial, or a dismissal. And so when we get to trial, that's when you get to see all the TV shows, everything's about trial. You don't get to usually see all the things that we do behind the scenes, getting the case ready. And one of the things that we deal with on a daily basis in the trial courts is that we have to present the case to the jury as basically as best we can to bring the jury back to that moment in time. And what happens a lot of times when you get to the actual trial aspect of it is, you have a citizen accused who's sitting there, and this is the most important day of their life, basically. And so they're always going to put on a good face. We struggle with the fact that, a defendant is always going to want to present the best face they can forward when they're sitting in front of a jury or a judge who's deciding their fate. And so what we have to do is we have to have the evidence to show the jury really what this person did at the time of the offense, really what was going on, because when you get down to the trial aspect, they're going to be putting on the best, the best face forward, and do what they can to basically, look like they're not necessarily the criminal that we think that they are, that the crime that they committed. So it gets down to evidence, and so we are so lucky that we have good partners in law enforcement to bring us the evidence, because the law enforcement officers are the ones that are going to be collecting the 911 calls, they're going to be bringing us the photos, they're going to be doing all these things that we have to have to prosecute the case successfully. And the way it works is that we're so accustomed to television shows and CSI and Law and Order that we expect certain expectations, and that's what our juries expect, and that's those expectations we have to deal with on a daily basis. And so the more evidence that the police can bring us, the stronger the cases are going to be, because when everyone's watching TV, they expect that, but in our world, those shows are about as realistic as a Star Trek, and we have to kind of reacclimate jurors' expectations to know that it doesn't just happen like on TV, the way it happens on TV, and it doesn't look the way it does. The crimes don't get solved as quickly as they get solved on television, and everything doesn't always get wrapped up in a bow like it does in the TV shows. And so it's always a constant education process for our jurors to understand what we're dealing with and what the expectations of the trial are going to be. And so we also have to do everything we can to protect the defendant's rights, and there's certain rights the defendant had. A lot of times in cases, I had a case recently where the murder victim's family says, well, what's he going to say in trial? And I said, well, he might not say anything. He doesn't have to testify. And that's sometimes a hard concept to really educate people on, but the defendant has a right not to testify at all, and you may never hear from him. We have to prove our case beyond a reasonable doubt, and that's the highest standard in the law that exists, and we have to prove that. And juries sometimes say, well, I believe the witness, I believed it happened, I just didn't think you proved it to me beyond a reasonable doubt. And we struggle with that on a daily basis, and so it's so important to have sufficient evidence to be able to successfully prosecute the case, because we have that higher burden. The person is obviously presumed innocent until we prove them guilty. The defense also has the ability to subpoena any witnesses that they might want or any records that they might think are important for the case. And then, of course, we have an open file policy where everything that we have, the police basically give us everything they have, and we turn everything over to the defense counsel, and he gets to present that to his client as well. So the defendant knows exactly everything that's going to be presented in the case. And so we have to prove our case beyond a reasonable doubt. And like I said, that's a very high burden. And I use this slide a lot of times to illustrate what reasonable doubt is, because there's no definition under the law. And so if I were to ask someone what this puzzle piece is depicting, if I was going to ask someone in the audience, who wants to be a guinea pig? Who wants to, well, you're in the front, I'm going to ask you. If I was going to ask you, what do you think this picture is, what would you say?
Puzzle parts.
Puzzle parts, yeah. And what are the puzzle parts? Can you tell what the puzzle parts might be depicting at this point, just based on 3 of those pieces? No, I see someone shaking their head. No, of course not, because there's just not enough there. So how much evidence do we have to prove? Well, now, what do you think that looks like? I see you laughing. What do you think it looks like? A gun. Okay. Now, do I have every puzzle piece in there? No. So I'm not proving it 100%. I can't prove it to you 100%. But do you have a pretty good idea? Do you feel like that's pretty good evidence that is depicting a gun at that point? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's what we talk about reasonable doubt. It's not going to be 100%, because to be 100%, you have to be a witness to the offense. And if you're a juror, you're never going to be able to be 100%. But we want to stress to jurors that once they know with a reasonable degree of certainty like that, they should be able to feel comfortable convicting someone. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Justin to talk about specific hate crime statute.
Well, good evening again, everybody, and thank you for having us out here. Again, I'm Justin Lord. Just to put into context how I fit into what Elise just talked to you about, I'm the Chief Felony Prosecutor of Criminal District Court number 4. It's one of the 17 felony courts here in Dallas County. And what I do is that slide you saw about trial. I try cases. Once the Dallas Police Department and other agencies in Dallas County make arrests and bring the offenders to Dallas County Jail, once the grand jury indicts, then the cases come to people like me, and eventually, if necessary, we go to trial and try those cases. So I want to talk to you a little bit about how the hate crime statute in the state of Texas works, because I know there's a lot of people that probably have obviously heard hate crime statute, but you don't know exactly how it works. So first, it's found under the Code of Criminal Procedure, and it applies to offenses against a person or his or her property. Now, let me give you some ideas of what it means, an offense against a person. Those are crimes like assault, a misdemeanor assault, a felony aggravated assault, sexual assault, or aggravated sexual assault. The property crimes that are applicable under the Texas hate crime statute are arson, graffiti, and criminal mischief. So if the state, us, the district attorney's office, if we are going to allege that someone's crime was committed because of the hate crime, as a hate crime, we have to prove that to a jury or judge beyond a reasonable doubt. That same burden of proof applies. And what we have to prove under the law is that because of the defendant's bias or prejudice against a group identified by race, color, disability, religion, national origin, or ancestry, age, gender, or sexual preference, we have to prove that is the intention of the person in committing the crime. Now, let me digress for just a second. This language, sexual preference, is not my language. It's from the statute. The legislatures of the state of Texas use that language. This is from Article 42.014. That's not my language or our language. And they've defined, under the law, it says sexual preference equals preference for heterosexuality, homosexuality, or bisexuality. Again, I don't choose those words. The legislature put that in there. So, if we could go to the next slide. Let me talk a little bit about what happens. So, in a case in which we believe the motivation for the crime is a hate crime, we're looking for an affirmative finding. What that means is a judge or a jury, along with deciding whether the crime was committed, it'll be up to us to prove that the motivation for that crime was based on those factors that you saw. What it does in the state of Texas is it bumps up the level of the offense. So let me give you a little bit of an example. Okay, we talked about an assault case. A simple assault case would be one where someone's punched in the face. It's a Class A misdemeanor. Well, if the state of Texas were able to prove that the reason the person committed that was because of someone's sexual orientation, we were able to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt, then what that would do is it would bump up the minimum term in jail from up to 180 days to a year in jail. So what the hate crime statute does under that circumstance is it makes the crime, the punishment, more serious. Now, if the crime is a felony offense, it bumps it up a level. And let me kind of give you an idea of how that would work. If it's a state jail felony, you saw that list of what all the punishments were. I know everybody remembered that right off the bat, what each one of those is. State jail felony being the lowest level. If the crime is a state jail felony, that's punishable by 180 days in state jail up to 2 years. If we prove the motivation was one of those listed under the statute, it becomes a third-degree felony, which is now punishable by 2 to 10 years in prison. So you see the significance of being able to prove that is it makes the person can get a lot more time locked up is basically what it comes down to. So if you have a state jail felony, it becomes a third degree. A third degree becomes a second degree. A second degree becomes a first degree. And first degree felony, I think as you saw, let me give you another example. An aggravated assault is one where serious bodily injury occurs. You know, Lee showed you the picture of the gun. Let's say someone shoots someone and they survive. If we prove that this is a hate crime, the range of punishment becomes 5 to 99 years or life in prison. So it's a significant increase in punishment when we get to the felony levels. I want to talk a little bit about, just to kind of give you an example of how it will work, a case that I think has been in the media recently, and I can't get any specifics of any case. It still is under investigation, but I think some of you may have heard about the graffiti case that happened right here in this neighborhood. And I'll kind of give you an example, and this is all hypothetical. I know the Dallas Police Department is doing their job right now. There's a tweet that came out today that they're investigating this as a hate crime. So let's talk about what would happen if that is proven. Well, graffiti of a public monument is a state jail felony. That is punishable by 180 days up to 2 years in the state jail facility. If after a thorough investigation it's determined that the motivation, the intention behind the perpetrator of this crime is based on sexual orientation, then guess what? If we can prove that to the jury, now you're looking at a third-degree felony, and the person who did it could get up to 10 years in prison. Significant increase to the range of punishment. That's sort of a real-world example of how it works. Now, I want to kind of make a distinction here. You know, the hate crime statute is basically a punishment enhancement statute. So it doesn't change the underlying crime itself. If someone commits an assault, we still have to prove there's an assault. If someone commits an aggravated assault, we still have to prove there's an aggravated assault. Where the hate crime statute comes in, again, is bumping up those ranges of punishment, and that's very significant. And there are also some circumstances. I'm going to have Investigator Silva talk about a case we just recently worked on where we were able to bring to justice an offender who was committing some very serious crimes. If you have a first-degree felony offense, certain first-degree felony offenses like aggravated robbery don't fall under the statute. And I know some you may say, well, if you have an aggravated robbery where the motivation is sexual orientation or race or religion, shouldn't you bump the punishment range up? Well, you don't, but here's what we can do. We can still prove that evidence during the punishment phase of the trial in order to seek a higher punishment within the first-degree punishment range. So that evidence is always something we can prove. Now, I wanted Investigator Silva to kind of talk about this case because I think it's kind of a good example of what we're trying to do in terms of bringing justice to members of our community.
Once we announced our LGBT Task Force within our office, probably about a month ago, I got a phone call from a younger felony prosecutor, not a lot of life experience, saying, listen, I have a case here that has some issues with the trans community, and I would like you to consult on it. And the way when Elise was talking about, when the cases are indicted, they go down to a court, if it's an LGBT case, it doesn't go directly to the LGBT Task Force. It goes down to the regular court prosecutors. Now, if they have any questions or concerns about any of the culture, lingo, things of that nature, they can call us so we can consult. Well, this time, it being the first case, I went ahead, went down there, took a look at it, and thought, okay, let's pick this up and run with it. And a little bit about the facts of that case. I'm not going to put people's names out there because to protect their privacy. The case is disposed of, but I think at least one of the victims does not want to be named. But it was a case where we had an individual that got online and made dates with trans escorts. And he would show up for the date, and then he would rob them and sexually assault them. Now, this happened, at least 3 that we know of. One happened back in September 2013. While Dallas Police Department was investigating it, he committed a very similar crime up in Farmers Branch. And then we also found where he committed a crime against, and I don't believe that this person was in the escort business, but committed another crime similar, sexual assault, robbery, but they were up in Chicago and didn't really want to prosecute. So I went to dig into his background, was able to find, a lot of things, a lot of little crimes he did, a lot of public intoxication, a lot of places that he frequented. He had no criminal history, and at this point, the defense attorney went ahead and tried to take advantage of younger prosecutors. But then when we got the case, we're like, okay, we know a little bit more about this. Let's go talk to all our victims, any witnesses we have. And we were able to resolve it in a way that the attorney came back and was begging for penitentiary time. But the genesis of this case, it was a little bit odd. We had people not wanting to be very forthcoming to law enforcement initially. So the crime was reported initially wasn't really actually the facts. We got the facts later on, and we were able to develop the case. But Justin?
And I think the reason we wanted to talk about this case is just it's a shining example of how we want everybody in the community to know that we're all about fighting for justice. And we are on the side of the victim. And anybody who is the victim of crime has the right and should feel absolutely free to come to us and expect us to prosecute, and we will. And we can't do it without cooperation from everybody in the community, from members of the community. We want everybody to know that when victims come to us with their cases and we can prove that this crime happened, we will vigorously prosecute it and we will seek justice for everybody. And this was a great example of how we were able to do that.
And we hope the more that we get our name out there and meet people, the more forthcoming people will be about telling the truth from the get-go, because that just makes our cases so much better. Just to let people know that, hey, no matter what the circumstance, if you're a victim of crime, we will prosecute.
Hey, Justin, can you explain why, like on a first-degree felony, and there are indications that it falls within the statute, that we don't pursue it from that standpoint?
First-degree felony is the second most serious crime in the state. 5 to 99 years of life is the range of punishment. The next level up is a capital felony. Capital felonies are punishable by life without parole or the death penalty. The statute does not authorize us to elevate a first-degree felony to a capital felony. So essentially what would happen in certain cases is, by alleging along with the crime itself that the motivation is a hate crime, we're basically requiring ourselves to prove more than we otherwise would with the crime. And as I said earlier, those facts are still facts we can prove in punishment in assisting a jury in determining what the appropriate punishment is. But under the law, the statute wouldn't allow us to elevate that crime from a first-degree felony to a capital felony. So as a practical matter, in terms of making sure that we have the best chance to get justice, it becomes more of a burden actually to try and prove that in guilt and go ahead and rather than proving it up in punishment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's perfect. Okay, great. And we're going to bring up Craig McNeil now, who is an assistant district attorney in our public integrity unit, to discuss a pretty important letter that was kind of the beginning stages of our task force.
Thank you. Again, my name is Craig McNeil. I work in the Public Integrity Division, and also as a Veterans Court prosecutor. But one of the things I want to talk to you about is this letter, which I'm going to read to you here in just a second. It's interesting when you have a work environment where you feel that you have important work to do, and we obviously do in the district attorney's office. But it's also very important to feel like you're a valued member of the community and a valued member of that office. And it's important for the citizens of this county to feel that every citizen in this county is valued by your office. But it's equally important for someone to understand who works in the office that their boss values you. And that's the point of this letter. And let me give you a little bit of background about myself too. I'm a retired Army Reserve officer. I spent 9 years on active duty in about 7 different states and about 4 different countries, including Iraq. That was a lot of fun. And I spent a lot of that time sort of in the closet because you had to be in the closet. That was the pre-don't ask, don't tell repeal days. And so it was very difficult to feel valued for everything that you were when you're in that environment. So when I came back to work here in Dallas for Mr. Watkins, I felt valued. I felt that it was important. I felt that I was considered as a highly regarded member of the staff. But when this letter came out, that cemented it for us. And let me just read it to you. It says, "Dear staff," and this is from Mr. Watkins in February of this year, "I'm always striving to make the Dallas County DA's office the most progressive office by continuing with our smart on crime approach. With that in mind, I want to announce the development of our new lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender task force. We need to ensure that the LGBT community knows we'll advocate for them and pursue rigorous prosecution when warranted. Several months back, I met with members of the LGBT community and learned that many victims of domestic violence or hate crimes were afraid to report the crimes to law enforcement. It was disheartening to learn that many crimes are going unpunished because of fear and mistrust. If crimes are not reported, it is a missed opportunity for justice, and that is unacceptable. I formed a dynamic LGBT task force to bridge the communication gap and change the perception that the justice system only works for certain people. Our team consists of Administrative Chief, you met all these people here today, Elsie Lindberg, ADA Justin Lord, Senior Caseworker Renee Brazel, Investigator Tanya Silva, Community Prosecutor Jaime Vasquez, and James Tate, who will serve as the LGBT spokesman for the office. I would be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to share how much I value and respect each and every member of our Dallas DA team. It is our individual uniqueness, our own life experiences that make our organization thrive, and I am proud of our diversity and firmly believe that we best serve our county by being representatives of our communities. Sincerely, Craig Watkins. Now, when I saw this letter, it's hard to express how good it made me feel as an individual that I was valued by my office, by my boss, and that our community was going to be represented at every level. As a side note, in my life outside of the prosecuting office, I'm the president of the Q Cinema Film Festival program in Fort Worth. I'm also a member of Fairness Fort Worth, which is an organization that was formed after the raid on the Rainbow Lounge 5 years ago last Saturday in Fort Worth. So I have a lot of context that I bring to my job as a prosecutor in public integrity. I have a lot of context I bring to my job on this LGBT task force. And I'm glad we have this opportunity. I want to thank Mr. Watkins for that. And I want the citizens of this county to understand that we're very serious and dedicated to making sure that everyone's interests are protected. Thank you.
Okay, so this is, how many people actually saw this image on the cover of the Dallas Force? Good, that's exactly what we wanted to happen. So, when most of you probably know No Hate, the No Hate campaign is developed and designed by a pretty famous photographer named Adam Boucher. And when we found out he was coming to Dallas, I approached Mr. Watkins and I said, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about something that I think would be good for us to send the message to a large portion of our community about how serious you are about protecting the LGBT community. And really I anticipated that he would say, you want me to put duct tape on my mouth and be photographed? But that wasn't his response at all. He was right for it from the very beginning. And so this image went viral completely after we shared it on our own social media platforms. And then when No Hate actually shared it on theirs, I was getting calls from Vermont, from Arkansas, all over the country, saying we are so happy that there are elected officials that are really standing up. And it made me very proud, and you should be proud as well, that you have the highest law enforcement officer in the county that really does have your back. So we were really happy for this, and there's more coming with that as well. So this is actually one of many images that we had taken. It was very, very important to me personally, being kind of an instigator of this task force with Mr. Watkins, that my own community as a gay man did not see this as just window dressing. This is not Mr. Watkins painting a beautiful picture during a campaign season that he really supports our community. He really does support our community. And so in order to do that, it wasn't enough just for us to create a task force. We really needed some visions and some things that we wanted to do. So I was very happy when Elise came to me and said that we've secured Roberta Clark, who is the regional director for the Anti-Defamation League, to sponsor about an hour-and-a-half training session for our entire staff. Nearly 300 of our prosecutors and investigators went through a sensitivity training that spoke and addressed specifically the LGBT community and immutable characteristics overall. So this is the first time that a sensitivity training has ever taken place in the district attorney's office.
I want to make sure I heard you right. You said an hour and a half was all you put into that?
The first time around, yes. And we had to do it during a non-jury week because our prosecutors obviously are prosecuting 100,000 cases a year. So we are, it's an ongoing feature, but it was, pretty amazing to see this team building exercise and to really understand and see the light bulb turn on. Mr. Watkins was quoted as saying, we are better prosecutors, better investigators when we understand the communities to which we serve. And it makes sense. When the people in our office, the men and women that strive every single day to really protect you all, understand who it is that they're protecting, justice has a much closer prospect of getting served. So this is our social media. We encourage you all to just keep in contact with us. Learn. We are always posting on our Facebook and our Twitter handle about things that we're doing, and Flickr, and what's the other one, Tracy? Instagram. Yeah, we have Instagram. That's kind of like an inside of our office. So we specifically left quite a bit of time at the end of this for questions and answers because we figured that there would be a lot. So I'll invite the rest of the task force back up, and then we can just take some questions if there are any. Yes, Mr. Hughes.
As usual, I don't really want to ask a question. I just want to say something.
Okay.
I am so pleased to see this task force. The county has been such a great partner to the city on important law enforcement efforts, not just this, but animal welfare. DA Watkins has been a real leader on as well. And one thing I'd like to point out to people in this room is that when DA Watkins put together his task force on domestic violence, he made LGBT domestic violence a feature point of that effort, something that frankly we need to do at City of Dallas. Also wanted to say, Adam Medrano really wanted to be here. He is traveling, so he couldn't make it, but wanted me to point out that our City of Dallas LGBT Task Force, several of them are here. If you're here on the task force, you stand up. So, Patty and Mel. Okay, there's several. I know that these people would love to reach out and help you however they can, and certainly count on my office or Adam's office for any help you need. And thank you so much for doing this, Greg. This is great.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. There have got to be some questions for sure. I've had emails back to back. So.
I have a question.
Yes.
It's Daniel Shipman, resident of Dallas County. The question is, whenever you were going through the hate crime enhancements, how it bumps it up a level and all of that, it sounded like you, of course, knew that some of the language wasn't real friendly to our community and stuff. But aside from that sort of thing, how does the current statute bind your hands in some ways? And what would you like in a dream world for the legislature to be able to do to make that hate crime enhancement stuff more effective in its application?
Let me take the first part. In terms of how our hands are bound, it limits which offenses it applies to. It would not apply to a robbery, for example. It doesn't. It basically applies to 3 property crimes, the ones I mentioned: arson, criminal mischief, and graffiti. And it applies to the assaultive offenses, to the entire Title V, all assaultive offenses. Now, in a perfect world, I would think that they would probably just make it so it's part of the element of the offense, rather than making enhancement. Now, there will be downsides to that, and I think one of the things I was trying to explain was, in response to Mr. Watkins' question, is that the hate crime statute provides for additional facts to be proven to a jury beyond a reasonable doubt. And the way it's written right now, it's actually separate from the crime. I think I can see some circumstances where it would more broadly apply to other offenses. I don't know if I'm answering your question as well as you want me to.
I think you're doing very effective.
And then also, just so you know, even if we can't prove the actual hate crime element of the offense, that doesn't mean that we're still not going to prosecute, for example, the aggravated assault deadly weapon. Whatever the initial offense is, even if we don't have proof enough to prosecute it as a hate crime, we're still going to prosecute the initial offense.
And just a follow-up comment, and then I'll shut up, is what an awesome day it is whenever our community can have this many ADAs and a task force and everything else come and meet with us. I mean, we have a long ways to go, but we really have come a long way.
Well, I think the message is we're here to serve. That's why we're here.
Very grateful.
One of the things that happened when we created the task force was we didn't really know what the needs of the community were, and so we don't want to create what it is that we do. We want the community to tell us what they need and then be responsive to it, and that's why we have the email up here for people to give us ideas and to tell us if there is a problem, if there's something that needs to be addressed, and whatever that may be, that's what we're here to do. So we haven't specifically formed all the things we're going to do because we want to do the things that you want us to do, and we just need to know that and have that communication, and that's why we have the way for you to communicate with us easily.
And let me just also interject, when you're talking about the police departments or you're talking about our office, one of the things that this issue, I think Justin kind of touched base on, is when we're presenting this to a jury, it's almost like a special issue that we want them to consider in punishment. And it's either going to be yes or no in regards to whether it's a hate crime or it's not a hate crime. And to that extent, whether it's aggravating factor that's going to allow us to increase the punishment range or not. But the most important thing, and why we go through the trainings that we have, and why we'll continue to go through the trainings, because we do want to be loyal to victims. We want to be loyal to all our victims. So when we have our jury trials, we have to educate them on why these are aggravating factors that we have to stand up for and make sure that we enforce and protect our community. And so it's not an automatic thing, because from jury you may have 12 people that say, yeah, that's a hate crime. You have 12 others that don't. But it's our prosecutors are kind of like Tanya was saying earlier, when we had the younger prosecutor who didn't spot that issue, who didn't realize that this was an aggravating hate crime. So we're in the process of continuing to educate our people so that we can make sure that everybody knows that these are aggravating factors and we won't tolerate it. But the most important thing is that starts at the top. And whether it's an hour or whether it's 5 minutes with our office, if they hear Mr. Watkins say this is something that we're going to address, then we'll address it.
And I just want to recognize this is Mr. Harris, who's the first assistant
in
charge, and we report to the DA's office, and Mr. Watkins' right-hand man. Are there any?
I have a question. My name is Stephen Antonio. I'm actually soon to be resident of Dallas. My question is, thank you. My question is, I heard you say the hour and a half of sensitivity training. Is that all that you're giving them, or are they going to get more sensitivity training? Because I'm from Memphis, Tennessee, and it's the training that I've seen in place there and some of the other major cities that I've been to, it's more than just an hour and a half, and that's in the beginning. So I want to know, are y'all going to prolong it? Is it more sensitivity training, tolerance, or what else is being involved?
Absolutely. I mean, it was, first of all, we're the 7th largest district attorney's office in the entire nation. We have 500 employees. That's a lot of people to get into one room to do trainings, especially when they're working 10, 12, 14, 16 hours a day to keep really bad people off of the street. This is a question that we debated back and forth when we do our inaugural training session. How long can we make it and actually have more participation? We could have probably made it 2 hours and had half of the people go through the training, but we figured we should probably start off with some basic knowledge about sensitivity and immutable characteristics and extend it. So it's the first step. It's a grand step considering that it's never happened before in our office. So I think we're off to a great start. Does it end there? Absolutely not. And we're in the stages of planning the future trainings right now. Did you have a question?
Yes. Hi, my name is Sam Nesbitt. I'm one of the community health program coordinators here at Resource Center. And I have a question about HIV criminalization and how will it be treated with the LGBT Task Force. As we know, men who have sex with men in Dallas County account for 71% of the new cases of HIV. How are the new infection, people that are knowingly aggravating assaulting people, will be treated with the LGBT Task Force?
Well, I can answer that. We just had a guy a couple of weeks ago, was that a couple of weeks ago, who had actually infected a young lady, a minor, but then while he was in jail, affected someone in jail who came back and actually assisted in the prosecution of that person. And what the judge did, just to show you that I think that what we're doing is working, the judge actually had an option of whether or not he would what we call stack. Your sentences, the guy had about, what, 3 or 4 cases, and what happened is I think he got 55 years on the first case, and then I think he got an additional 20, which was the max, and an additional 20 on the last case. So what he did was, now normally they'll just let them run consecutively, or let them run concurrent, which means they all run together. But no, this judge said, no, we're going to stack it, which means that after he finishes that 55, if he gets lucky enough to parole, guess what? He still has to start over on the 20. And after he finishes that 20, he's going to have to start over on that last 20. So are we taking it seriously? Absolutely, we're taking it seriously, and our judiciary is taking it seriously.
I have one follow-up question. Why was it not considered a hate crime even though he knowingly went after this minor or that person?
Well, I think he had met the young lady on the internet, if I remember the facts correctly, and was obviously just having a relationship with her at the time. Are you referring to the case that he had with the other person?
Or just in general, why aren't they considered hate crimes?
I don't know. On that, I don't think that's going to qualify as a hate crime.
I don't believe the facts in the case prove that the motivation for his crime is one of those factors we talked about. Basically, he was just a sexual predator for minors.
You almost have to have in a case like that someone saying, the reason I'm doing this crime is, or their behaviors indicates that's what they're doing. That isn't always clear in the case.
Yes.
Okay, well, I have to piggyback on that question. Why is it that I read a story about somebody being prosecuted for infecting somebody with HIV for 95 years. So I'm not understanding why is it go to a first degree felony other than like a second degree?
It was a first degree felony because it involved a minor initially.
Right.
It was a sexual assault on a minor, so that was the first degree. I think the other two, and again, I'm talking off the top of my head from what I remember, I believe the other 2 cases were classified as maybe second degrees, and that's why you got the 20 years. So you had a punishment range on the first one from 5 to 99 years to life. And I think did he plead guilty to the 55? I think he actually pled guilty to the 55, and then you had the other 2 cases that we would typically, to be honest with you, would say, okay, we already did 55, just let those other cases run with those, is what we would typically do. So, however, because of this, the facts of this case, no, we didn't let him, we didn't let those cases run concurrent. What we did was we went to the judge. We wanted to go to the judge. He was hoping that the judge would let the cases all run together, but the judge didn't. So once the judge popped in for an additional 20, we came back that following Monday and asked the judge for an additional 20. So that's how you end up with the 95. But the punishment range on the case with the young lady was the one that was the first degree, from 5 to 99. And it's, that's where how you end up getting 55 on that one.
Okay. And my second question is, what are y'all doing for people that are affected with HIV? Like, are y'all doing? I have any initiative for people that let's say they're in jail and they're HIV positive. What is there for them? Do they get medicine or do they get any kind of treatment while they're in jail?
I can answer that. I'm Shelley Knight with the Dallas Sheriff's Department, and I actually work over the release division of the jail. And Parkland works very close with us, and they make sure everybody comes in through our intake division. They get seen. Our lines are horrendous with them seeing the medical care. Once they leave that intake division, then they go upstairs and they see another provider. And they're always given that opportunity to get whatever medication that they need. If we can't get them that medication, then I have seen Parkland allow their families to bring in certain medication. But that is all up to the medical staff. So, but yes, they can get, we make sure we have medical staff on site in every jail 24 hours, 7 days a week. And those are providers, not just nurses.
Thank you.
There's a running joke within the DA's office. I'll tell you that joke is that we have a certain responsibility. I had someone ask me a question once, and I appreciate your question, but there are certain things that we do as prosecutors, and the question you're asking is really a function of the sheriff's department. And so my joke is that we don't fix potholes. We do a lot of other things. And so I just want, the whole reason we're educating individuals is because they really don't understand what we do at the DA's office. Even though we're looking at the criminal justice. The statute doesn't allow us to do it. There's a different entity that's responsible for certain things.
Would you be open to a suggestion on the floor? I have a current case of a victim of a crime, have a current case where the person is being pursued by the district attorney. And I received a victim's rights packet from a Claudia Arnick. And whenever I went to try and get a restraining order against the guy, knocked on the little window door there, and they said, no, your packet is all the information you get. We can't help you get a restraining order, even though the police detective Sanders had said we would recommend. He recommended it to your office as a hate crime. The victim's right coordinator, they couldn't help me because it wasn't a domestic violence case. And so then, after being passed between Ann Duffy and Caitlin as the ADA, he finally had to follow me to a couple of meetings around town, the person who assaulted me, follow me to a couple of meetings around town, and finally after having to be restrained in the courtroom by the workroom, by Caitlin's office, finally she was able to do what I begged for at the beginning, which is get a restraining order against the guy. It would be helpful if a detective like Detective Curtis Sanders, who recommended this crime as a hate crime, it would be helpful if whenever I went and said, hey, I'd like to get a restraining order against this guy, if they could have helped me from the beginning, instead of him having to follow me to 2 different places around town, and for me to have to call the police on that, and then for him to physically have to be restrained by a DPS officer and the bailiff in the courtroom, outside in the workroom of court number 9, before finally, Caitlin was able to say, we can get the judge to sign off on a condition of probation. And so it would be helpful if whenever a detective recommends it and says this is a hate crime, if there was some way for us to call and say, would you help me in getting a restraining order? I had to hire a private attorney to try and get a peace bond on it. So, just a suggestion.
And that's kind of a problem in the law, because I think what it sounds like the judge was able to do in your situation is make it a condition of bond and stay away from you. Okay, and so that's something we can do, but like for the restraining orders that we're able to get for people, it is family violence. They have to have that dynamic for us to get the restraining order. So sometimes the law precludes us from doing things. We would love to help victims in all kinds of ways, and that's a good example of one of the ways we want to, but then we're constrained in terms of what we're allowed to do, what we're not allowed to do. But if something like that happens in the future, that's one of those really good opportunities now that
the word's out about the email, because if things are, you're not getting the response and you need to know more, we need to do more, that's a great opportunity to email us, so one of us can follow up and make sure that all the pieces, are followed up on. Because, I mean, no matter how good we are, no matter how much training we have, it's a system made up of humans. And we're not perfect, and sometimes, mistakes are made, but we will do everything we can to follow up and make sure that the right thing happens. But that'd be a great opportunity to let us know. But I'm sorry about what happened in your situation. I'm glad that the bond was changed and you got that restrained.
I was wondering if we could, I was wondering if we could get a little bit more information about how the members were selected. Specifically, I'm wondering, Renee Brazil used to, I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name right. She was community liaison with Maureen Dickey's office. And Maureen Dickey, for those who don't know, used to serve on the Dallas County Commissioners Court and was one of the most anti-LGBT persons on the court for many years. So I'm kind of wondering, how are members selected if we've got somebody like that who's now representing LGBT rights when there's no one who's actually LGBT on the task force?
There are.
I am. My son and wife are here tonight, so I mean that's part of how I ended up being part of this. And yes, Maureen was certainly not an advocate for us in the community. However, she and I had a relationship of respect. And so while it may not have been the most ideal scenario for me as a gay individual, it certainly was a brilliant learning opportunity for me. And Ms. Dickey paved the way for Mr. Watkins and I to have a conversation and encourage Mr. Watkins to make me part of his staff. So I'm indebted to her for that, because this has been a brilliant opportunity and a brilliant fit for me, I think. So I do appreciate the concern, and I certainly appreciate that there's other, maybe there are other people that you might have a concern about, but thank you for bringing that forward, so I had an opportunity to address that. I know Maureen incites all kinds of reactions. So personally spent some time with her, so I get that.
But Renee, to come to your defense, I mean, that's not all you do for office. I mean, you wanted to be a part of this. You wanted to see this project. So
it was more of the letter went out and people volunteered. It wasn't like this.
So why is there no LGBT person on this? And why is there no direct involvement?
There are 4 out of the 8, actually, so half of the task force identifies as LGBT.
Well, continuing on with that question, is there any? Do you have any other public meetings for the task force, or this is
the first of many that we hope to have. So I'll address something that has been a question after question after question. People have asked me over and over again. There are a variety of citizens that sit on the City of Dallas's task force. There are other task forces in different cities. So they've continued to ask me, why are there no people that are outside of the DA's office sitting on this task force? And it is a very simple answer. It's privacy. This task force at any given time can be made privy to incredibly personal details of someone's life that we are bound. I signed a privacy and non-disclosure agreement whenever I came to work for the district attorney, that I can be sued if I disclose any information that is not in the public domain. So the reason that we have only district attorney staff sitting on this task force to do what it is that we do is because no one in this room that had something happen to you would want a member of the general public knowing very intimate details of your life. We're bound, and so we have a much higher level of discretion to not share that with the community at large. Yes, Patty.
Hi, my name is Patty Fink. I'm president of the Dallas Gay and Lesbian Alliance and a member of the LGBT Task Force for the City of Dallas. And I want to echo what Councilmember Kingston just said, in that we're excited about this task force and want to work with you. And so I want to extend I know that we have a number of members here, and also several who were not able to make it tonight who wanted to be here, including Councilman Madonna, and several are watching online. And we've been texting some questions and such, and we all want to extend a hand to invite you to our meetings. We meet on the 3rd Wednesday of the month. It's not in July, the council's on hiatus. But we'll meet again in August. We meet at Dallas City Hall, and we'd like to work together whenever possible, because we've you may have seen in the news, we've been making some strides.
Yes.
They're important to our community, and we'd like to march with you in the same direction.
And we'll march right along with you, Patty. We really will. Thank you. Yes.
My name is Katie Sprinkle. I'm an attorney here in Dallas, and I've known probably most of the folks up there. I'm transgender, and most of the folks up there and in this room knew me before I transitioned. And when I left town for 2 years, completed my transition, and returned. There wasn't a single person in the court system, whether they were DAs, judges, probation officers, that knew me before, that turned away from me. Dallas County is probably one of the few counties where county-wide there is an acceptance of the entire LGBT community that you're just not going to find county-wide anywhere else in the state except maybe Harris County. And I think we are probably ahead of them in many areas. So a lot of what we're seeing here just doesn't flat out exist anywhere else. And I have a friend who practices just in Tarrant County who is also transgender. When she came out, they were openly hostile to her. That did not happen to me, although I was terrified that would. But everybody in Dallas accepted me with open arms. And I think that speaks volumes for the community that we have, and the strides that we're making, at least in our hometown. And so I think they needed to be applauded for that, because that's huge. And I think people need to understand that whether you're gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, being in Dallas County is not going to be the disadvantage that many people think it's going to be, and it would be in other parts of the state. So,
Other questions? Yes.
Statistically, Dallas is actually, Dallas LGBT community makes up about 3.3% of all LGBT in America. And with that being said, I just, for one thing, want to say thank you for what you're doing, because it's amazing. I've lived all over the United States, and it's really nice to see that my home actually is supportive of our community. But so with those kind of numbers, do you see the task force growing over time?
Absolutely. In fact, we're in the process of bringing on a couple more members. We have roughly, 16 different divisions, I would say 16, 17. We have a lot of divisions in our office. We do a lot of different things. And so it was important to me. Unfortunately, we just, one of our ADAs has gone on into private practice. He also acted as our Hispanic liaison. It's very important to me, as you heard earlier, that Mr. Watkins wants our office to be very representative of the community, and it's the same thing with our task force. We need to have someone in our task force that is a Spanish-speaking, bilingual, and that can really approach those communities. I don't, I'm certainly not a statistician, but I know that there's a very large number of Hispanic LGBT people in our county and throughout our city, and so it's important for us to, again, it's about engaging, it's about communicating. We're also wanting to add somebody from juvenile to our task force. The sky is the limit, really, with this task force. This meeting is really the catalyst to get us going. So yes, to answer your question, we really hope to have 25 or 500 people on our task force. Any other questions? Yes.
Oliver Bloomer, I'm on the task force. I'm also the past chair of the Transgender Education Network of Texas, which is the 501c3 that educates the entire state rather than not go in the private and public sector. I also am a vetted trainer with the Department of Justice, and wanted to know when we can begin to train. The mandate from the Department of Justice as of March this year. I'm coming to do a 3-hour module. It's based specifically on training on transgender and gender nonconforming people, and it includes the hate crime as it's That's its foundation. So I'll be happy to talk to anyone who wants to start that. We can get that going. If we have over 500, that's going to take us a year. And I have other trainers along with that, including Nell and other people who stepped up.
Okay.
So it's not like we have to depend on one person from the Department of Justice. And it is highly mandated. We'd love to get you in on it. We've
Perfect.
almost completed the Dallas Marshals. As of the end of this month, we'll have that. Next, we're going to go to over to the Sheriff's Department, and then Irving, and we've also got the SMU and the Tarrant County Community Colleges and their police force as well. So, happy to talk to
Perfect. We
anyone.
appreciate that. Yes. Please reach out to us.
Thank you for being here, because it is incremental. It may sound like we have a lot of things, like why hasn't this happened before? But it's like politics or cooking bread. You have to do one element or two at a time, and that has to be just right. And then we have all the egos involved and all the different groups within the community. So when you say LGBT, it's not a community. Remember that. It's communities.
Yes.
Subgroups within those communities. So that's part of that 1.5 awareness we're not getting yet. And I really thank you for doing the 1.5 awareness, because that's just like opening your eyeballs first.
Yes.
The brain really isn't moving. We want to do some things where you're actually more engaged than more in an hour and a half. Okay?
Okay. Thank you. Yes, now.
I have one more question.
Sure.
Would you consider, as part of the mandate of this of the task force, working with other departments to address discrimination?
Internal departments or?
Departments in the county. Which I'm not sure of what the organization chart is for this, but I'm specifically asking about the probation office.
Well, that's kind of like fixing the potholes that Mr. Watkins was talking about. We can't tell probation what to do or how to do it. We certainly can, communicate with them. Well, it's kind of, they have their boss, just like we have our boss, and we can't tell the probation department what to do, but we certainly can be, if there are concerns, we certainly can basically let them know what the concerns are and what the community is saying. We're happy to hear whatever they are, but there's sometimes things that are outside our lane of control, and so we just can't step into someone else's, department and fix their department. We know we're trying to work on making ours the best it can be, so we certainly can
But if you
talk
saw
to.
discrimination, you would make an effort to address it.
We would be happy to communicate. We can't fix it if we don't have any control over that department. We can't tell the department what to do, but
Exactly.
we certainly.
I understand that, but if
Sure.
you see discrimination, you're going to do whatever is within your power to bring it to your attention.
Sure.
Well, did you know that the probation office is trying to force trans women to dress as men?
I did not know that.
And that your legal department is supporting them in that?
Now this is new
I
information.
think it might be something that the task force could look at.
Yeah.
And this comes not from me, but this comes from the judge.
The DA's office, we're responsible for representing county entities. Probation is a state entity. And so they would have their own, I think they're probably represented by the Attorney General, not the DA's office. So our legal department wouldn't actually be in a position to advise them on legal issues.
It's not advising. I didn't say advising. I said to use whatever influence you may have to address the situation.
In other words, would you take that information that they're telling you and put it in the hands of the right person to help with changing?
Sure.
Is that right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would absolutely do that.
Well, I think you can take it. I'm putting that in your hands now.
But if we're going to really get the kind of results that you want, then what I would suggest is that you would probably have to get with.
Email us.
Yeah,
the,
email
the
us so that we can, we'll know the specifics of it, and we'll know what it is that we can do to address it.
And our deal is that, we're setting a model for a lot of things. We're setting a model for district attorney's offices throughout the state, throughout the country, and even within Dallas County. And so
I understand. I think it's excellent work. I think it's a great step forward. I think there are a lot of issues with transparency and
if we're
accountability.
successful, we're gonna be successful in this, and then that means that you'll see other Dallas County agencies that we have no control over do the same thing.
I think that not only will you see Dallas County, is you'll see other departments. If it's consistent with other initiatives that we've taken, you're going to see other areas throughout the state of Texas and the nation that will duplicate what we've done here.
I agree, but I think they need to include the community, not have other people speaking for other people.
So for you to really tackle it, we have to wait until you move to Austin?
Oh, since you brought that up, you know what the re-election is.
So we can keep you in Dallas if we want. It's just up to us.
That's right.
Patty?
I just wanted to add to some of the discussion, especially after you've sort of explained who is working on this task force and such. For one, the use of the word task force may be a bit confusing, I think. Especially since ours at the city has been well established with that term, maybe your work group or something. I don't know, but we're not doing the same things, obviously.
No, not at all.
But I work in healthcare, and there's such a thing as private health information. We talk about PHI all the time, and we can't discuss it with anybody. But there are certainly things that we discuss in the course and scope of our positions every day that have nothing to do with PHI. And I believe that that this group that is within the DA's office would benefit from having community members serve an adjunct with you for all of those discussions that do not involve PHI in your world.
I'm so glad you brought it up. One of the other things, the other dynamics, is that we want to be responsive to the whole community, and part of the problem is that we have certain individuals, like you said, it's not the LGBT community, it's the communities. And to be able to feel like every single person is represented, and sometimes it's hard to pick who, because then people feel like, well, I should be on it too, or this person isn't represented, and then it becomes so big and so expansive that it doesn't become as effective. And so what we're interested in doing at this point, we're definitely always open to other possibilities as we develop, but at this point what we're interested in is having more meetings like this, where anyone, no matter if they even are affiliated with a certain LGBT part of that one community or different communities, have an open dialogue with our office, with the DA, with knowing what's basically, whatever your needs are, we're willing to address them, no matter who you are, no matter even if you are affiliated with a community, because we don't want just some voices in the different communities heard, we want everybody to be heard. And so that's something that we're going to definitely strive to do.
So how often would you guys plan on having this type of meeting? Would it be like quarterly or monthly? Or?
Well, that's why we're here today, is for you to tell us how often you need it, because we really haven't gotten all those pieces in place, and so that's going to be an ongoing dialogue. For the community to tell us.
Too.
Sure. And it's like we're going to have these meetings for people to voice their concerns in front of everyone, but we're always available. We're going to respond to you, and your voice is going to be heard. So you don't have to worry about that, for sure.
Okay, I have another
Sure.
suggestion, question.
Yes.
How about a subcommittee that like a community committee that works with your community?
We have explored the idea, and we're still exploring the idea. Like Patty said, an ad hoc committee that would, in essence, kind of gather on a more frequent basis the LGBT communities, ideas, concerns, voices, suggestions, and then bring them, into our task force, which is something that we're still exploring with. Again, we're in the very infancy stages of getting, our program and the ideas and things that we want to do going. So yeah, that's a great suggestion.
You guys should join the Citizens Prosecutor Academy and start a committee within the Citizens Prosecutor Academy.
Yeah, there you go.
I'd like more information.
Absolutely. Email me. Are there any other questions?
You have a lot of cake back.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So on a final note, really, thank you so much for being here. It's really, really important. We're glad there was such a great turnout because, this is important. Mr. Watkins has a lot of things on his plate, so he obviously sees value in what we're doing here. Otherwise, I'm sure there were 25 other places that he could have been this evening. So, one thing that I know is that when this community, voiced their concerns, your elected district attorney really listened, and didn't just listen, but he took action. So I think we should give him like So 2 more things. We actually, every quarter, we put out a publication called the Justice Report, and it gives you a lot of information and details about what's happening in your own communities and neighborhoods. So we have a sign-in sheet on the back. We specifically will be making all the email addresses that you give us tonight in a subfolder, so we'll kind of keep up with you and email you from time to time about stuff specific to the LGBT communities. So that's first. Again, thank you, DACA. They provided 2 beautiful cakes. Please eat a lot, because there's a lot back there, and the refreshments, but thank you guys very much.